I'm speaking today with Jim Whitehurst, the President and CEO of Red Hat, well known, of course, as one of the biggest names in open source and Linux-based solutions. Thanks, Jim, for speaking to us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
I guess these days, open source is not one of the big buzzwords. Cloud computing would be a big buzzword, and there's others. What's been happening, I guess, recently with open source technologies, and where is it going? I mean, I think one of the biggest criticisms of open source, why it hasn't been sort of picked up by as many people as initially thought, was that there's no sort of giant in the industry to lead it forward. There's no HP, there's no Intel, there's no IBM. What's the sort of status of open source these days, and where do you see it going?
Sure. Well, hopefully we'll be that giant at some point in the future. No, in all seriousness, I think there are two major trends going on in open source. One, which gets a lot less press because it's less sexy, and that's very simply most major mission-critical applications are moving from old Unix-based systems to Linux systems, and so our 30% year-on-year growth the last several years is primarily driven by that. Where you're really seeing the heat in open source is around cloud computing. Whether it's Google or Amazon or Facebook, all of those systems are built on open source. So cloud computing is generally fueled by and run by open source. Right, so you get most of the press talks about the outputs of that, using Google Docs or Amazon, but all that is built on open source, which obviously is very, very helpful for our business as well. So
you're benefiting, I guess, in a sense from trends that are happening that are sort of almost beyond your control, a move away from Unix and also a new interesting cloud computing.
Yeah, well, we would actually argue we're key drivers of that. And a lot of what you're actually seeing, it's us Moore's Law in action. So, we hit a tipping point several years ago where Intel x86 chips just got faster than the old specialized, what they're called RISC architecture, old Unix chips. And, just the sheer volume that Intel puts out, they can just move forward faster than others. And so anybody looking at high performance now is looking at x86 chips. And when you do that, Linux is the operating system in the data center to run those computers.
In terms of what you guys do in Asia, and especially what you guys do in financial services, I guess how would you describe the banks and other financial institutions that you work with? And what do you do with them? I guess about 20% of your revenue comes from Asia. So maybe could you describe where you're situated in Asia and where you see the real growth in terms of financial institutions, banks and stuff?
Sure. Well, similarly, as around the world, financial services represents about 20% of our revenues. It's by far our largest vertical globally, and certainly here in Asia as well. And there are really three primary use cases for our technologies. First, and where we really got our start was in trading, whether that's stock exchanges, whether that's internal bank trading platforms. So, today over half the world's equity trades run on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. The top 5 exchanges in Asia all run Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And that's for speed, right? It's pure performance. Milliseconds matter, microseconds matter. And Red Hat on new modern Intel-based chip architectures is the fastest way. So that's clearly a strong point, and most of the world's major exchanges run it. Second would be all of the web-based type applications, because virtually all web technologies and all Web 2.0 companies are built around open source. The open source tools make most sense for web type applications. So whether that's the online portals, online banking, all of those things were also particularly strong. The third, which is really starting to take off now in Asia, is the replacement of the core banking systems from Unix to Linux. As the Unix systems have aged, they haven't really kept pace with innovations going on with in Intel chip architectures in Linux. And so those systems are starting to move, and those are big, massive core banking systems that are really driving significant revenue for us.
Okay. Japan's your largest market. What is it that you do mainly in Japan in terms of financial institutions?
Well, we run the Tokyo Stock Exchange. We run most of the bank trading platforms, the internal proprietary trading platforms. And we're probably further along in Japan in making the moves from Unix to Linux and the core banking systems. We do quite a bit of that. And again, it's around speed and performance and price. And I think Japan has a very sophisticated set of OEMs there, obviously with Fujitsu, Hitachi, NEC, who are all strong partners. and really also service the SIs in those relationships. And so our strong relationships there are helping drive our products into the banking sector there.
What's the China story? I mean, that's where I suppose we see you adding the most sort of staff and the most resources. Where's that going?
China's literally doubling for us. And I think that's because of two things. First off, frankly, I think China's a little bit behind versus Japan in terms of just technology adoption. And so some of its systems are, on average, older. So there's a lot of Unix to Linux that's happening, and that's helping us double our business there. The second dynamic is actually quite interesting. I'd use the analogy of a lot of the developing world going straight to wireless cell phones and just skipping running the old wired lines. You're seeing that a lot in China with infrastructure immediately going to cloud computing. And because open source really drives cloud computing, that's a huge opportunity for us. So with whether it's banks, telcos, manufacturers, government, across the board, we see significant opportunities around cloud.
But having the banks in China be leapfrogging, as you say, because they have these monstrous in-house teams that build entire core banking systems completely, customized by their own massive IT staffs. I think ICBC's got 10,000 technicians building its sort of core infrastructure. In terms of this leapfrogging that you're talking about like new added-on systems, or you're talking about going from no core banking system to an open source system like what you're talking about?
Oh no, I'm talking about new systems. It's really twofold. There's a whole set of second-tier banks, smaller banks that are just really getting going now with significant growth, and they're leapfrogging immediately to cloud-based solutions for core banking. The big guys, the big four, clearly have the big traditional Unix systems they've had for years, which they're starting to migrate to Linux. But they're also adding things like online portals and ability to trade online and all that incremental online functionality. And in those cases, they're leaping immediately to the most modern architectures.